Larry Bly, Roanoke broadcasting legend. Appreciate your time, sir. I got to ask you, first of all, we'll start with your military career. Like, how long were you in? What rank were you in? And, how did you get into the Army?
Well, I got into it during the Vietnam War because it was the draft. I went to college for 2 years up in the Shenandoah Valley and worked radio for 2.5 years. And I made the mistake of not going to another college because I was having too much fun with radio. And Uncle Sam came a-knocking. So I went directly from radio to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I was inducted. And remember at the induction, you probably remember this too. You sit down and have fill out all this paperwork, endless paperwork. I want to know everything about you. Uncle Sam wants to know everything about you. And on one of the sheets it says, what would be your job description of preference? And I put down radio, because I'd already been in radio 3 years at that point. I was a veteran radio guy. And a friend of mine who went down with me says, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You'd be a mechanic or a cook. I said, well, it doesn't hurt to try. And lo and behold, right out of basic training, which I also took at Fort Bragg, I became a 71R20 MOS, which is radio. However, they packed me off to the Special SOPS Division, Special Warfare, JFK Center for Special Warfare, at Fort Bragg, where I typed for a year. I typed forms for people's 201 files. So I'd been there for a year doing that, and I loved it. I love Fort Bragg. So I'd been there for a year doing that, and one day the master sergeant in charge of my little division came walking in and says, you are one lucky son of a gun, except he didn't say that. And I said, why is that? And he says, you're going overseas. And I went, oh no, I'm going to Vietnam. He said, no, you're not going to Vietnam. You're going to Korea. And I said, Korea? What's in Korea? He says, about 50,000 troops at that time, Army, Air Force, Marines. And he says, but here's what's really important to you. He says, in Seoul, Korea, is the headquarters of the American Forces Korea Network, and I'm going to see that you get a job there. And he did. So I was a network announcer, a DJ, heard all over the country for about a year. And I make Korea safe for rock and roll. I used to occasionally send out a request to Kim Il-sung up in North Korea. I said, I know he's listening. There's no way he couldn't be listening to my show. Of course, the Army didn't think too much of that. So while I was there, one night a guy comes walking in the studio and he says, my name's Jim Hampton and I work at a big radio station in Detroit, Michigan, and I like your act. When you get out, call me, gave me his card, and I'll get you a big time job in radio. So I came back home and got bored sitting around for a couple of months and drove my folks nearly nuts. And I went back to my original radio station, WHBG in Harrisonburg, and they were still paying me what they paid me 2 years before. It made me mad. And I says, you know what? I'm going to take a job in Detroit, Michigan. So I ended up going to WWWW. An FM radio station in Detroit, which we called it W4, working for Gordon McClendon, who is legendary. If you ever look it up, he almost invented the top 40 format. And I worked there for a while, but I really didn't like, with CFL across the creek, everybody else was just also ran in that market. There were 3 big stations, and I don't think I made much of an impact. I was a little flea on a great big dog. So I said, I need to get me a job back down south again. I'm a southern boy. No need for me to be up here in this cold place. So I put out some, I'm telling you too much, aren't I?
No, you're fine.
You can smack me if you want to.
No, this is good. This is good.
So I went up to Detroit and I got a job there, and so after a while I said I got to get back down south again. So I put out feelers to WPGC Washington, which I always listened to them growing up. I wanted to work there. At WBT in Charlotte, North Carolina, and ROV in Roanoke, because I knew some people here. And I got job offers from all 3. But the BT thing didn't work out, and I didn't have a first-class license, so the PGC thing didn't work out either. So I thought, well, now that leaves WROV in Roanoke. Well, the other thing I liked about it was the fact that I was within a couple of hours of my family. I could go up the valley and visit them. So I liked it here, and I immediately fell in love with the place. And I joined a legendary bunch of disc jockeys. ROV was known all over the country. A little old 1,000-watt, 24-hour ROV was the small to middle market radio station of the year 2 or 3 times with Billboard magazine. And so the personalities went from here to big, really big markets. So it was fun because I was working with some really great people. And in the meantime, I started an ad agency on the side, and that grew to the point where I had to quit radio, but I never quit radio. Bert Levine on the station said, I don't want you to leave. Can we just say that you're going to do weekends, oldies, and then once in a while we'll call you in to do morning or afternoon drive when someone's on vacation or someone gets it. So I was kind of their swing man for 30 years, if you can believe that. Every time I tried to leave, they gave me another position, a little bit more money. Not a lot, but a little bit. And meanwhile, the agency grew, and I finally had, the agency was successful for 40-some years, a fairly nice agency. And in the midst of all of that, this big, tall fellow by the name of Laban Johnson, whom I hardly knew, I'd met him once or twice, came to me and says, I got an idea for a TV show. And I said, well, what is it? He said, it's a cooking show. And I says, oh, no, there aren't too many of those. What a great idea that is. He said, oh, but you don't understand. It's going to be a particularly peculiar show. It's going to be all ad-libbed. And we're going to call it Cookin. We already had it all in his mind what it was going to be. And I said, well, what do you want me for? I'm a radio man. I'm not a TV guy. And he said, well, you've done plenty of TV. The big TV auction and all that every year. I'd done that for years. I said, I'm not even sure I can cook that good. And he said, oh, even better. I said, well, why would you ask me? And he said, well, I said, I don't even know you very well. And he says, well, I've listened to you for years on radio, and I think you're funny. I think you'd be great on this show. And he dragged me onto the show, and it worked out. We had certain magnetism between us that happened on the air. It was just a natural thing, and the show just grew and grew and grew and was seen nationally. And so, it became a big deal. A lot of fun, and we had a great time doing it.
Well, I guess you had a lot to unpack there. You did a great job at that. I appreciate it. But just a couple of questions in the mix with that. So, how long were you in the Army overall?
I was only there for 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
What do you feel is the biggest thing that you took from being in the Army that you applied to your work in radio? Obviously, you were already in radio.
I was already in radio.
But just in broadcasting and your business as an advertising agency, what did you take from that helped you to what you've done throughout your entire life?
Well, my business partner, Marty Hall, who's no longer with us, was a Vietnam vet. He was an MP in Vietnam. And the two of us would often talk about what we took away from the military, which was, a sense of wanting to do the right thing and wanting to do it right. And we decided between the two of us that it was a great thing for both of us. It gave us determination, and it gave us structure. And so, yeah, we always appreciated our military experience.
Dad, obviously, you're known for a lot of things in this area. Obviously, you said your advertising agency was 40 years. When did you start? What year did you start? And what time did you start?
74, 75, and it shut down about 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Yeah.
So in 2013? Does that sound
something
right?
like that? Yeah.
Okay. So you look at your radio time, and especially ROV. You mentioned it was a powerhouse, and there was a lot of great things. What was overall? I mean, you said you had a great time and all that, but it had to be neat because obviously radio then is different than radio now. But just what were some of the funny things that happened? I'm sure there was a bunch of. Is there anything that really stood out? I mean, you told me the one about Wolfman Jack. If you could share that.
Yes, I had. I had just been here for a short period of time, having moved down here from Detroit, Michigan, and I was doing 7 to midnight. And the Guess Who was in town, a group called the Guess Who, and they had a hit record, Clap for the Wolfman. And for some strange reason, I'm sure they could have pre-recorded his part. I'm sure it was pre-recorded. But for some strange reason, I guess the Wolfman decided to go with them on tour, which seemed silly to me because he had a full-time job in radio. He must have been crazier than me, doing more than one thing at once. So I guess he got bored sitting around the Civic Center all evening long with nothing but that one thing to do, and then the record, you know. So somehow, maybe one of the radio guys said, well, would you like to get down to the radio station to be interviewed? I don't know how it happened. Anyway, my doorbell rang, a little light over top of the board. And I said, who's there? It's the Wolfman. I said, oh yeah, sure, that's the Wolfman. All right, yeah, sure, get out of here. He must have said, no, this really is the Wolfman. It really was. I couldn't believe it. Pardon me. So anyway, he came in and I says, sit down by the mic beside Mike's side where we would interview people. I said, sit down, we'll talk a little bit. He said, no, you get out of that chair. I'm going to run your show. Kicked me off of my own show. I have a picture of it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Working with Bart Prater was a hoot. He was always a lot of fun. He was my program director for a couple of years. And he was always pulling pranks on me. I was on the air one day and I thought I heard a cow in my headphone. And then I heard a goat in my headphone. And I'm trying to read some live copy, maybe the weather. And there are farm animals in my head. Something going on. So anyway, I got back into a record and I'm looking around, how could this possibly be? And someone said, you need to go back to the production studio. Prater's back there. He's patched himself into your board and he's running sound effects. He was always doing stuff like that. It was a lot of fun, really. There are not very many funny stories in the advertising business, however. It was a lot more serious than radio and TV. And that's one of the great things I talk about how lucky I am, because while I was in the serious business of advertising, it was our business and we had to make money. And that's serious stuff. I had a business partner who was once in broadcasting as well. So he understood my need to continue doing weekends at the radio station, to do the TV show. He was always, he said, Larry, whatever makes you happy, as long as you're here when you need to be. He was a great guy to work with. But he understood that I had to have that creative outlet. He said, well, save a little of that creative outlet for us here at the advertising agency.
So so you were at ROV, you said 30 years. What was the start point and ending point, roughly?
Well, I came down to 71, and I left in the latter 90s. Yeah.
So the late 90s?
The late 90s.
And then Cookin Cheap, when did that start? Was it 78, 79?
80.
Oh, 80.
Mm-hmm.
So
1980.
I got you a little earlier.
Yeah, 1980.
Now, when you look at Cookin Cheap, when you went into it, and obviously you were surprised that Laban would come to you with this show, but just talk about just the obviously it was popular in this area, but nationwide and even worldwide. I mean, in your wildest dreams, did you think that a little old show at PBS, WBRA would grow to what it was?
Oh no, we had just started doing the show and it was started to take off, and it was sponsors. It was sponsored actually by Kroger and a couple of banks, and there was never a time when somebody wasn't paying the bill. In other words, we were fully sponsored. And we'd only been on for about a year, I guess, and there was this gruff old station manager put them on the air back in the 60s. Rex Rexroad, just a wonderful man. And Rex was one of those no BS kind of guys. Whatever came to his mind, he was going to tell you. And he ran into me in the hall one day, BRA, and he says, Bly, I got to tell you, that cooking show that you and Laban are doing has to be the stupidest thing I have ever seen on TV in my life. But, he says, people seem to like it. So I guess that all counts in this business. I'll leave you alone. I said, well, thanks for the compliment. Rex was always famous for, he ran a good ship, a tight ship, but he never put his finger in programming. He always let programming go. And I always appreciated that. Oh, and I will tell you a quick story. I'm sorry. We knew that the doggone thing was catching on, but we had no idea how crazy it was in some areas. So we got an invitation to go to the PBS station in Philadelphia. And I can't remember the call letters, but anyway, they said, we're going to set up a stage down at Reading Terminal, which is this big, have you ever been there? It's a big terminal with all food, all this food and all this stuff, all these. And if you all will agree while you're here, you'll go on TV and we'll do some fundraising, but we'll also take you down to Reading Terminal and we'll tape a show there in front of this live audience. So Laban and I get almost down to Reading Terminal, and I says, this is the craziest place I've ever seen. There must be something going on here. I said, look at all these people around the sidewalk trying to get in. We got in and they says, no, these people are here to see you. These people are crazy about the show. Philly loved us. I don't know why, but they did. They loved us. And we put on a show there. I think we signed autographs for 2 hours. It was just amazing. So yeah, it was something to see.
You know, and then when you look at just the accomplishment of it, and you know, everything you've done in your career, I mean, you know, obviously you did radio before you were in the Army for a couple of years, but when you look back at your broadcasting career and radio and Cooking Cheap, and then you're still doing it with the Two Larrys podcast with Larry Dowdy.
Yeah.
When you look back at your career and your legacy here, what comes to mind, and what do you think of when you think of your legacy? Because in my opinion, it's a legacy that you had here.
I just think back at a little country boy, grew up on a 300-acre beef cattle farm in the Shenandoah Valley, and the only thing in the world I ever wanted to do was be on that radio. I didn't know how those things came through the air or how they played those records or where they came from. I just knew I had to be on there. And there was a picture of me when I was a little kid with pots, the lids that go on pots, and I'd turn those things over and spin them and sing songs, pretend like it was this thing. So at no point in my life, I mean, I'm so lucky, I just seamlessly went from one thing to another, to another, to another. I couldn't have planned it out any better. I just feel so fortunate that it worked out that way. And I don't know about the legacy, I just know that I spent a lifetime doing a lot of things that I really enjoyed doing. And apparently did it fairly well. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
oh, I do have one thing I want to say.
Yes, sir.
You may not be able to get this on, but I just want to say that the folks at the VA are just top notch. They have taken such good care of me for 20-some years. I just came off a prostate operation. I left my prostate at the Salem VA. But I will tell you, those people over there are hardworking. They're great. I just think they're the best. Just the best.
Well, we'll definitely put that part in there as a tagline. You know, and the thing is, I mean, how often are you recognized out in public? I mean, I know that you...
Not as much as I used to be. It used to irritate the dickens out of my friends. We'd go out to restaurants and people would come over, and I thought it was funny. I thought it was fun. I got a big kick out of it. So yeah, but not so much anymore because, well, I'm 127 years old. People think that I've been gone for a long time. That's one of the reasons Dowdy and I do the podcast, so people know I actually made it back and I'm still alive. Sometimes, yeah, a little more so recently, and I'll tell you why, because the station, BRA, has been airing old shows. And so now I have a whole new generation of people coming up to me saying, oh, this is a funny show. I have young people saying, that was really funny. So, you know, it's a whole bunch of new, and some of the older folks too saying, wow, good to see you back on TV again, even if they're the old shows. So it's kind of happening a little bit. But you know, the interesting thing is, down through the years, except for that one period where it was a massive hit for the TV show, I still get recognized as much for my voice as for my face, because I've done so much voice work through the years. I got a cough. Just coming off a sinus infection.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
I was going to ask you, so take me through the taping schedule. Did you do one show a week, or how? I mean, I know you did it as live, so how many shows would you do in a week? Or
we did one show a week for 13 weeks or 27 weeks, depending on how big the season was. Sometimes it was 27, sometimes 13. We'd do it once a week, broke for the holidays, so we would skip a couple of weeks for that. And we would roll into that studio about 3 o'clock on the nose, and by 3:30 we're taping. Boom. And by 4 o'clock we're done. We're out of there. Of course, we had to clean up and do stuff like that. But And we had Miss Doris. Miss Doris helped us out. She was tremendous help. She'd have her pots and pans out for us, and it was sort of, she was our great lady. She did it all for free too. It was a labor of love, so she did that. Yeah, we did that for I think about 27 seasons, as I recall. Right. Yeah, but it was like clockwork, you know. Very seldom, and we had in 27 seasons we only had one stop, one edit. I think a camera went out. No, two. And one time one of our mics went out. And of course, we were always having mic problems. We'd drag these little things. They had them then, but they weren't very dependable. I guess stations didn't want to use them on us. I don't know why. So here, if you watch this, we're dragging around this big wad of stuff behind us. Sometimes just falling over it, you know, the cords, all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Do you have an episode that stands out amongst the others, or do you have few, or is there they all pretty much the same?
Well, we just had a good time with all of them, I guess. Well, I do have no, I don't. I don't. I will tell you that we did one on Smith Mountain Lake, on the lake, literally on the lake. We're in a pontoon boat, so we're doing this the whole time. I think the viewers got seasick watching us, and we were throwing stuff overboard. People say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Ecologically, you shouldn't do it. That was a lot of fun. I think we did one or two of those. We went out often with cameras. Blues Public Television is very nice about doing it because it cost a lot of extra time for them. Of course, we were sponsored. We did one up on Mill Mountain. We did one from, where else did we?
I think I remember an episode you did it from Laban's backyard.
Mm-hmm. In fact, there's a picture here I think you'll get of us doing it on my back deck.
You did it at a theater, outdoor theater?
Yeah.
Not bar, it was an outdoor theater up by
right.
Lexington.
But yeah, we did it on my back deck.
Yes.
And we also did the Cook sisters out there. The Cook sisters was our way of getting our station back. They came to us one day and they says, you know, this is educational TV, and well, you're not too educational. We said, well, it's public TV. It's not educational TV. We're not a part of that. They said, well, you know, we think it would be good if somehow you could impart some knowledge to the viewer. You know, did you know that if you use so-and-so in your food, it'll do. So Laban and I sat down at his apartment one evening having a few brews, and he says, I got an idea. He says, I think this sounds like a really dull, terrible thing to have to do to our show. So he says, I think what we ought to do is have two old gals come out in bad drag, the Cook sisters, and they'll dispense this in a humorous manner, and whether anybody thinks it's good or not, at least they'll think they're funny. And that's how that worked out. So we did that. So one time we taped all the Cook sisters in one thing. They were all for all the shows, and they just cut them in. That's the only time we cut something in. And one time we're in a back deck at my house, and neighbors start showing up to see these two guys in drag sitting back there having a good time on camera. It was a big thing. And while we're doing it, a big UPS truck pulls up, and Laban says, oh, look, sis, yeah, UPS guys here to bring some of those French films you like so much. And we got tickled. We had to stop. We got to laughing so hard. He was a funny guy. Laban Johnson was a very funny man and a very nice man.
Do you, might sound like a dumb question. I mean, obviously you miss him. How often you think of him? You think on a daily basis?
Well, I think of him a lot because I've got pictures that I come across occasionally. You'll show some of those. Yeah, I think about him. I gave his eulogy at his funeral. And it was a combination of hysterical stuff and serious stuff. I mean, I quoted some literature that he liked an awful lot, I knew, some Edgar Allan Poe, and then I told some mean stories about him. And we had people laughing, the place was rocking and rolling. We had a good time. And when we went out to the cemetery, he surprised us one last time. We went out to the cemetery, and they had the tent set up and everything over his grave, and they lowered him into the grave, and about that time around the corner steps a New Orleans jazz band, and they did New Orleans jazz and played him down. And everybody's dancing and clapping. It was his final surprise to us, a New Orleans jazz band.
He was my mom's theater teacher over at Jefferson back in the early 70s. So, well, I tell you what, this has been awesome. Is there anything you want to add or say that I might have missed? Or
No, I think we covered about everything.
And the podcast is every week, right?
Every other week.
Every other week.
Yeah, every other week, except when I get sick, which has been
Which is aired out.
a lot of that in the last year with the prostate thing and all that. Yeah.
But I'm glad that the VA took care of you, because we should definitely, being veterans,
Oh, they
definitely
do.
should take care of us.
You know what? Some of the VAs get a really bad rap, and this one did for a while, but I don't think recently. But they're really first-class people over there. They know what they're doing, and they treat you so well.
And you know what? You treated me well. Yeah. And like I said, I appreciate you giving me your time, because I feel like it's kind of like you're talking to Babe Ruth or something like that. And it's seriously, I mean that, because like the Dave Rosses of the world, you and so many others, you grew up watching them, and then you get to meet them face to face and have a sit down. I mean,
I'll tell you what, you want to hear some stories. That broadcast luncheon bunch, I'll swear.
Just to sit in.
And this has happened a couple of times. One time I forget what restaurant, and some guy and his wife got up, they were sitting over in a corner, and he come over and he says, "Man, all those beautiful voices, talking at the same time and telling those funny stories." He says, "You guys are just the best." I mean, they got a big kick out of it. It's happened a couple of times before. People get a kick out of here, and we all tell tall tales. We all have tales to tell about our experiences in broadcasting.
It's funny, then when some of the I go speak to colleges and talk about broadcasting, and I tell them the stories, and they laugh at it too. I say, "Really?" I always say, "Yeah." I mean, there's nothing. You tell the youngins, because they think it's all about being in front of the camera, but there's so much you have to do behind the scenes to get ready to whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like for instance, Virginia Tech, with Bill Roth and his SMA program, you got a lot of people want to go into sports.
Sure.
I tell them, I said, hey, what I do today, it's all about timing. It's all about putting everything together. So that's really what's special to me, is sharing my wisdom. And in turn, listening to guys like you and all the veterans that have done what I'm doing today, and it's just such a special moment. Like I said, meeting you, like when my brother said he was working with you, and I said, and then it just dawned, and I didn't know you were in the military, so I said, okay, that's a veteran's voices right there. And I was thinking, I get to be, one of the people I enjoy in the business, but B, I get to share his story.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say.